Joining our program on this episode is Rory Vassallo, Principal of Private Investment Vehicle Vassallo Corporation and founder of Great Beginnings Childcare. Rory, many thanks to you for the opportunity to share what is a remarkable story. Born and raised in Kwinana, a working class suburb in Perth South, give us a sense of your upbringing if you could.
Kwinana. Kwinana is an interesting part of WA. We were very fortunate that we were that upper part of Kwinana, but it had every walk of life in it. From really, and a lot of people have gone on to do some great things. Most have gone on to do not much at all. It still bemuses my wife, when she hears stories about what Kwinana was like. That I survived it, but we did. And, I took business back there, and at one point I owned all the childcare centres in Kwinana, but it's a challenging area. It was a challenging schooling, and the things that shouldn't have been that difficult were.
Tell us a little bit more about that. As I understand it, you attended Kwinana Senior High School until the age of about 15 or so. Give us a sense of what that was like in a practical sense.
Didn't quite make till 15. I left at 14 and 9 months. I think about 3 hours that I was eligible to leave, I left, and they were quite happy to see me go. It was, the teaching, nothing against the teachers, but the majority of people weren't there to learn, and neither was I, to be honest. I didn't really learn in that style, and some of the fundamentals are missing on how to learn. I don't ever being taught how to learn. I had a great primary school, but when we got to those, I went from really great grades and, being in leadership at primary school to getting hurled into this Kwinana Senior High School, where you just came and you did just enough to get by and no one cared. So I wasn't the best student. I definitely found every teacher's pressure point and used it. But yeah, I got out of there as quick as I can. And I do remember the convo when I was leaving, the principal sort of said to my mum, he'll be all right. So that I didn't want to let her down, because she was the only one that ever said I'll be all right.
So you leave school 14 years and 9 months and began working as an apprentice welder, if I'm not mistaken. Talk me through that part of your life.
Yeah, it didn't really matter what it was. It was just I wanted to do something, and that's what it was. Very quickly worked out, this is not me. But I think, I credit a lot to that job, and I wasn't there that long, and I'm still friends with one of those owners. They were 3 guys that were young, and 21 I think and 20, and they had started a business, and we were all learning off each other, and I was a smart ass kid, and being exposed to them and how they got into business was something that I was like, I can do this. So it was a stepping stone. I don't think it was ever, I might have told mum and dad it was forever, but I don't think I ever thought it was forever. So that didn't last very long, and then we moved industries and had a real taskmaster boss after that, and then we had, he was a real hard man. I was friends with him until he passed away a couple of years ago, though afterwards in life we all found each other, and then from there I moved on to Bruce Shanahan at Welder, who was just an absolute gentleman of doing business. So I was the hacks, let's work it out as we go at the start, to the really hard businessman, to the gentleman. So I think all 3 of those exposures certainly made me realise about people and doing business, and there's lots of ways to do it. You just got to do it the right way.
You've spoken previously about that pivotal figure that Bruce Shanahan was in your life. Give us a sort of some context as to the job that you had at that time working in the automotive industry, and what you learned from Bruce and perhaps some of the others around you.
Yeah, look, Bruce, that industry in itself is not for me. People standing around throwing tennis balls around the showroom and, just bored. That's not me. I've got to be busy and I've got to be doing things. And, he gave me the job, and it was definitely higher than my skill level. Now, whether he gave it to me deliberately or I sold myself really well, but I got that job, and it was just a stark difference to what I did before, and the manager, the boss, or the owner of the business that I had before. And I just sort of looked at the way people communicated with him and how he treated people. Nothing against the other guy, he got it done, but it was a different way of getting it done. And Bruce, he was one of the first ones that taught me, if you can help other people out, you help them out, and he overheard me, and I'll never forget this. I was buying a new house, and you had to pay your stamp duty prior to it settling, and all my money was in the other house, and it was about $10,000, $10,500, and he just said, "I'll cut yourself a check and put it back the next, when your house settles." And he didn't need to do that. He just had overheard that convo, and I thought, that's the person I want to be. You know what I mean? Do more for people than they expect, and they usually will pay you back tenfold, and I did. Understanding your people and their situations. It's really hard to put what he did, but he was just a gentleman. And we used to have management meetings, and he would ask his PA to leave the room when he was going to get a little bit animated. So that taught me some things as well. That you don't have to expose everyone to your issues. Do you know what I mean? Just keep it directed at the people that need to be hearing it, because you don't want to destabilise everyone for no reason. So Bruce taught me a lot, and I don't even think he really knows that. He's gone on and moved to Hollywood and done other things, but he certainly did. So it was good.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but your entrepreneurial nature was on display from a relatively young age, as you mentioned there. I think you purchased your first house at 18 or 19, thereabouts.
No, I purchased it before, found some way, and I entered into the contract. I was still only 17. And then I had the money for the deposit and everything, but I couldn't get the loan. The loan couldn't complete until I was 18. I don't even know how I could enter the contract, actually. I think I found some way. And then they wanted to it had to be quite a long settlement, and because until I turned 18. And then, so I think I ended up renting it off them prior. So I was living in it before I was 18, and then we settled the day after I turned 18. So that was always going to happen. That was drilled into us from my parents. Buy a house. My mum and dad have, we grew up in Kwinana, very low socioeconomic, never borrowed money from the bank in their life, which is, that was a bit of a motivation to do it a bit differently, because I didn't want my kids growing up in Kwinana. But they would get a house, get those things behind you, and that's what we did. So got that in and got that foundation. Hadn't I done that, would I have been able to get involved in those opportunities that came shortly after buying that first house? Probably not. But I had that locked in, and very luckily for me, after that 2002, the property market went crazy, and I rode that, and it just gave me the foundation to do everything. So whether that was well planned or just lucky, I'm not sure.
Before we move on, a few years later, and by the time you're about 20 or so, I understand a chance encounter with the owner of a childcare centre occurred. Take us inside what you recall of that time.
Look, I knew of this lady. I was with my girlfriend at the time, and we'd gone to the Christmas party, which I always remember was in November, thankfully, because it gave me a bit of extra time to get the first centre nailed away by the end of 2003. And I knew of her. She was actually quite prominent in the industry that I'd worked in the rag trade, and we sort of just connected by having that chat, who knows who. And then I'm on childcare. Why childcare? And she just told me absolutely everything about the industry, and I kept filling up her red wine, and she kept telling me more. And she, even when I went and bought one, I said, "Hey, I'm going to buy one." And she said, "Oh, it's not as easy as you think." And I said, "I don't remember saying it was easy." So she wasn't negative, but she certainly was reminding me, and I'm like, right, I need to have more people tell me that it's not as easy as I think. And I found lots of them. And I was like, more and more people that tell me it can't be done, or it's not as easy as I think, the harder I'm going to work. So, and that's exactly what I did. We worked, we just, she told me about the regulations and all these things that she was telling me that were the obstacles of the industry. I just found a positive on why they weren't such an obstacle and why they were good. I like regulations.
So following that impromptu discussion, as I understand it, you then came across an opportunity to acquire an underperforming childcare centre in Applecross. Take me through this experience, if you could, and then how you went about the process of actually acquiring that first asset.
I remember going away and thinking, right, these regulations, they came up a lot in the combo. So I went to state law publisher and couldn't download them then, had to buy them, and they got delivered, and I literally read them back to front, which no one ever does and probably wasn't necessary. And then I thought, how do I buy one of these things? And I had to find, there was one agent who was selling them, and got in front of him, and he said, I might have something coming out, but needs a lot of work. And this was a 25 place centre, which 25 places is just tiny, in Applecross. And I thought, oh, that sounds good. And we went and had a look, and it was the pricey sum of $90,000. And I think we made that more than 2 or 3 times in the first year. But it was run by someone that had used it to get into the industry for immigration purposes. I'll never forget, he was cutting the cloths in 4s, and then washing them, and I quickly worked out that that's saving absolutely nothing and destroying staff morale. So I realised that whilst the stuff was still there, they were just, we've got a Scrooge running the show. So I learnt something from that lesson. I always remember them explaining, no, we've got to cut them in half. We've got to cut them in 4s, then we wash them every time we use them. And I thought, this is that. So I started looking for the things that staff don't like, and they don't like. I mean, whilst they probably do wash really well, and you probably did only need it to be a quarter of the size, it doesn't give the right image. So everything I do is about what, that unintended consequence of that behaviour, right or wrong, can have a knock-on effect that's just, you're never going to win from that. Half scoops of, they used to open the washing powder, laundry powder, and throw away that scoop and bring in his own that was significantly smaller. Things like that. So we learnt very quickly, and staff didn't like it. So yeah, and we didn't have to do too much to look pretty well there. And then parents liked us. That was the main thing, and it was a very good area. And they liked the fact that I was having a go, and then, I didn't even have children of my own, but they liked it. It was good. We had a good. Whether we would have had the same outcome if I had been my first centre in Kwinana or another different area. I don't know if it would have been the same, but the Applecross families were really supportive of us and having a go, which was good.
Like you said, so your early 20s, no kids of your own, you're pretty new or pretty much brand new to the industry. Was it a case of just learning on the job and speaking to the staff about what they like, don't like, speaking to parents? How did you sort of navigate that part?
Yeah, it was all feedback, seeking feedback, constant, good and bad. Like I said before, I'd surround myself with people that said I couldn't do it. And I would, right up until this day, listening. My whole success is about listening to the people and putting in mechanisms to get that feedback, good, bad, or otherwise. So they helped us shape. Obviously, we bought that second centre, which was in Kwinana. So we've gone from Applecross of, counting the BMWs and the Mercedes to, Kwinana, where I'd sit and have to give him a push start out of the car park or give him a jump start. And then our third centre was out in the country. So I was exposed to that really, broad client base really quickly. So we knew we had, we knew somewhere was right. And that feedback we got was invaluable. So, and dealing with the parents the way they want to be dealt with, it's not that difficult. Fundamentally, we're delivering childcare, but we're still in a people business.
Just on the different sort of socio-economic areas, so you got on one hand Applecross, on the other hand Kwinana. How do you go about positioning the centres so that the parents in Applecross might want a different experience to those in Kwinana?
Yeah, look, Applecross people know what they want, and they know what's right and they know what's wrong. Kwinana people, everyone knows what's right and what's wrong, and it's a level of what they'll tolerate or what they value and how they value it, whether it's right or wrong. But Kwinana families, we found, didn't know what to expect. So we spent a lot of time gently listening to them and giving them, and educating them on what is best. There was a lot of centres in the area, so we were a very different value proposition, and teaching them this is what you should expect. So we were pretty bold down in that Kwinana area. By the end of it, we had that centre full, and that centre had never been full in its 14 years before I got it. Had always struggled, but we got it. My ex-wife and I got that centre full quickly, and then we were bold enough to go and tell people to go. When they would leave doing a tour at our centre, we'd give them a list of all the other centres in the town and say, go and have a look at them. So a lot of them in Kwinana, they would, whether they were too lazy, I'm not sure. They didn't even bother. They just booked with us because we were that confident, that they won't be better than us. So. In the end, as I said, we ended up buying every centre in Kwinana, and it's because they just couldn't compete with what we thought was just normal childcare. And then we go out to the country after that, which further hones what the product offering was. And the lady that started that centre stayed on with me, and she helped. She stayed working for me and educated us on that country. The country values, and everyone knows everyone, and it's a bit different out there, so you've got to refine the product offering again.
Within the space of the first 12 months or thereabouts, you then acquired another 2 assets. You previously said, and I thought this was pertinent, I learnt a lot because I always bought very average assets where somebody had already made the mistakes. What were the fundamentals that you looked for prior to acquiring some of those centres?
People just not investing in them, not investing in their people for a start, the human capital. The second centre in Kwinana, they would just take any dollar that came in, outside school hours care, any family. They just didn't. It's not valuing everything. Every piece of it is, and not listening. We bought that centre in Kwinana off another group who just tried their cookie cutter approach. Like everything, we listened. That was the main thing. We listened to them and we made it work.
By the sort of early to mid 2000s, so around 2005, as I understand it, you owned and operated up to 3 centres. Walk me through the growth that ensued over the course of the next few years, and then how you went about the process of implementing new systems and procedures, because I know you were a real pioneer of the space at the time.
Yeah, look, in 2005, ABC had arrived in WA almost the same time I had arrived, but they started really arriving in 2005, 2006. And centres, people had basically thrown their hands in the air going, we can't compete with that McDonald's looking childcare centre down the road. So got a bit of a relationship with the real estate guy who sold me my first centre, that these people are just throwing their hands in there, they want to get out. So there was times we'd buy one centre and get 2 free, because they just couldn't compete, or they didn't realise, they didn't have the capital to what they thought would be needed to invest to keep up with those ABC looking centres. But that's not what people want. Certain people will want McDonald's, certain people don't eat McDonald's, but everyone eats. So we just kept it on service, and sure, we had some pretty average centres, and towards the end of that 10 years, that's why there was 37 over the 10-year journey. Some didn't fit the model where we were going, so we got them out, but there was still nothing wrong with them, because they're nothing. You put the right people in there, and people are happy. The centres are happy. So we grew very rapidly through that. There was the phone just didn't stop ringing, and I'm pretty flying by that stage. We're buying things and got no money to pay for them or no capital to run them, but we made it work. There was a time my wife, I think it was 07 or 08, she's like, right, the house is off limits, and we haven't had a mortgage since 2008, and that was because my wife's, the house is off limits. She says, you can keep going at this wild race and pace, but we kept the house out of it, and we just did. So we came up with some pretty unconventional. I didn't know any better, so I'd sit and think, how am I going to pay for that? And would go and sign for the building and the business, and no money. but I would restructure the lease. When ABC came in, they were paying higher rents. But a lot of these buildings, that hadn't filtered out to the mainstream industry yet. I was like, well, I can't get any money off the bank because I don't really, this is all throwing together. So we'd sign up for the building, and you could put end-or nominee as the purchaser back then, structure a new lease with myself, paying a little bit higher than rent, but still not where it was going, not where I thought it was going anyway. The lease was written for me, so there was no increases for the first 5 years, just in case the rents didn't go where they were going to go. But it was still a bit higher, and then I'd go and find someone to buy the building and keep the business for free. It's a pretty simple model, really. Buy the business for $1 and they get someone to complete that contract. The sellers didn't care. So we did that a few times, and unfortunately state revenue got a bit smart and we weren't allowed to put end-or nominee anymore, so we stopped that. But probably was a good thing. There was a bad deal waiting to happen. So we did that 3 or 4 times, and then we tightened things up. So it was always a progression. We knew we couldn't be that approach forever.
Just touching on that, looking from the outside in at least, you essentially had the real estate play as well as the operating business working on both aspects in tandem. In terms of the operating side of the business, how did you go about changing and evolving the model to suit the great beginnings?
The industry was changing fast. ABC had shown up and put in systems and processes, and we sort of had to mimic that, and we had some very strong processes. But as we grew quick, and it was heavily relying on the way we wanted it done. But so we had to check, and it was regulations were changing. The industry was no longer a cottage like it was when I was overnight. It was ballooning, and licensing bodies couldn't keep up, and so they were not making the rules up as they went, but they were certainly getting educated by this huge corporate group on how they should be interpreting the rules, which was fun. So I got involved in the association, and we knew there was going to be a massive change in the regs, and that I need to be at the table of this, and we can't leave it to them. We have to tell them how to write these rules, and that's what we did. So whilst we were setting our own standards, we were making sure on the other side it was my job to make sure they were workable rules as well for our staff.
Also thought it'd be worthwhile pointing out here that you had a unique approach to brand, be it the physical appearance of the centres or the way in which staff interacted with customers and potential customers. Perhaps give us some insight into what that looked like, if you could.
Yeah, look, that came a bit later. We were all different brands. We had a couple of them branded the same, and then we were all different brands because we didn't want to be like ABC. We wanted to be different, but then that came with its own issues, and then we had an unfortunate incident where a child got out of the centres. Thankfully, everything was okay, but there was some things surrounding that, and I was like, gosh, thank God we don't have one brand. This could have affected everything, could have sunk us. But the opposite happened. The complete opposite happened. There was Today Tonight there, and it was probably a big thing back then. It seems, and not at my centres, but children are getting out all the time these days. But we had parents out there going, no, go away. This is the best centre in town. You can't leave these guys alone. So from that, we were like, actually, we're building a strong brand and we're building a strong culture. Let's, it's the opposite can happen. It might not all go bad. If you're doing the right thing and you have an unfortunate incident, then the right thing will help you get through. So, we had families out there, and interestingly, they interviewed the father, and he was from Kwinana, and they right at the end, they told me it was balanced, and right at the end of that report, they aired it, and they said, he says, I've had to quit my job. It's the best centre in town. And I was like, that's the best endorsement I ever need. So, he couldn't send his kids to all the other centres in town. So I think shortly after, that's when I went and bought the other centres in the town. So, you can turn a negative into a positive. And that's when we said, let's do one brand. And the synergies that came with that were good for our group as a whole. It was more than just a uniform. Everyone felt they were all in it together. And we, that was a project that we did later. 2009 we started that project, and it repaid me tenfold.
Similarly, in terms of your business philosophy, you previously said happy staff means happy children means happy parents mean happy pocket. How did you go about implementing such a strong high performance like corporate culture and culture amongst staff in all of these centres?
That's 100% that, and you can't get it in any other order. Happy staff, happy parents. Happy staff, happy children, happy parents, happy pocket. Why? We listen, feedback, listen to everyone, every single person. I remember walking through a centre once and there was this junior trainee, which reminded me of me, and she said, why do we only do art and craft orders every 3 months? And I said, oh, probably storage. I'm not sure, it's just the way we do it. She said, well, we've got a new qualified in our room and she wants to deliver her program, but she can't because whilst, you don't put limits on us for what we spend, she has to wait. She has to wait another 2 months before we get that order. I said, very true. So we changed it from that moment forward, and qualifieds could do an order from the day that they started if they were a room leader to run their program. So I would never have got that feedback, but this young girl pulled me aside and, I'll never forget the way she said it. No greetings, no welcome. And so that's what I thought. And we still do now. We have so many mechanisms to find out. I want to hear from everyone, and I want everyone to have a voice. So we've got a whistleblower program at our new group where, anyone can put it for anything and know that they're not going to get in trouble, because I want to know everyone's doing the right thing. And that's feedback, whatever way. We survey families, we at Great Beginnings, and a lot of people do it now. We did our performance pulse, and I could almost forecast a problem at a centre and drill right down into what room it was and fix it before it came. Fixing a problem before it's a problem is a lot cheaper than fixing it when it's not, especially in childcare. So, they would do a 1 minute survey and questions were like, this morning I got out of bed and I felt, and if things were a lot going south at one centre, we could go in and throw some extra resources and find out what the problem was. And it's usually, could be something as trivial as a girl's left her boyfriend and she's, distracted and the other girl's not happy, and then she starts telling everyone else how unhappy she is, and then a parent finds out, and then it just spreads like wildfire. So we feedback methods of every scale, from parents to, I still haven't worked it out, but I've got a bit of an idea on how we're going to get it from the kids as well. And then we just hone our product after that.
Just on like some of those ideas, you're still such a relatively young in your business career at that point. Where did you look to for inspiration or for knowledge for some of these ideas?
McDonald's. We went to I used to drive my wife mad. I'd take the longest line at McDonald's and park the car rather than go through. I don't think I've been in a McDonald's for 10, 15 years now, but the way that McDonald's had young people just getting those chips were always the same. They were always cooked the same. Sometimes the burger was a bit sloppy, but the service that they had, good or otherwise, but the systems were strong. And I wanted to know, how did they get all these people doing the same thing? So, I'm peering into the manager's office around the chip fryer to see what are their checklists, how's this working? How are they getting everyone doing what they need to be doing? How are they getting them to do the basics? We do the basics first, and then everyone can add their flair thereafter, but the basics need to happen first. So, we still use lots of different things that I picked up from that, and I always saw, McDonald's stuff, they always had that uniform, and the uniform was always immaculate. They've sort of gone away from that now, but I was like, right, we need to have that strong, looking uniform, and everyone had input in it. Anything that happens in our company, people have input on it, right through to a new payroll system we put in, and the feedback was, they didn't like fingerprint readers. They thought it was a bit intrusive. I'm like, fair enough. If they don't like it, then we've got to work out another way. So we thought we need to know that they're on site. It's a compliance issue. So we had one that took a photo of them, and they didn't like that either. But then when I turned it into fun, and it was like the most creative photo, at the end of each payroll period would get, something that, God, we had Mexicans, we had all sorts of dress-ups, people dressed up, and it was a game. So we turned it into fun. So that negative into positive. But, we could have just rolled that fingerprint out, and it just starts as a tremor, but it goes crazy if it gets enough legs. So we listened, and then we said, we explained why it had to happen, and we turned it into fun.
Let's talk about innovation. You've been at the forefront of innovation across your business career, in particular with Great Beginnings. You introduced all natural playgroups, you ran your own training initiatives, you didn't implement surcharges on public holidays, you started to build centres with your own building company. What sort of prompted or drove you to pursue some of those initiatives?
There's things I like. If it sticks out to me 2 or 3 times, then I think that I've got to do something about that. And, the building company started with maintenance, a loose door handle, it's a small thing to fix, but try and get someone to come and do it. So we needed, any handyman can come and put a Band-Aid on it, but one of our values is no Band-Aid solutions, So we needed someone that could do it and do it quickly. So that's where the maintenance thing came out, because if it made me think twice, then I don't want anyone else thinking twice on it. So there was that aspect of just getting things done. It was the basics that needed to be done. The not charging on public holidays, which I was a bit worried about putting that out, because I was in the association at the time. I was the president of the association, and it was just what happened in childcare. But I didn't sit right with me. Why am I paying for a service I can't have? So I found a way, and it was, well, you can pay, but you'll get a make-up day, and if we can't give you a make-up day, then we'll give you a credit. We'll credit your account. So, the bank was still happy there, the parents were happy, and the staff were obviously happy, because we weren't proposing to open on a public holiday. Things, I think my personal view on things have driven, that's not okay. I don't like it. And we're doing something now as well. Childcare is very, very hard to get staff. And without them, we're nothing. It's hard. It's a hard job. Like, I don't know if I could do it. It is hard. My job is to make it as easy as possible and to give them the best resources to do it. But still sometimes they want to change. They want to change, and they want to have a breather. And so, we're looking now, okay, how do we let them go off and do a breather, or go to another centre and realise that, hopefully that we are still good. So we're going to launch something soon where they can take as long as they want off, and when they come back, we'll start their long service where they left off, so they can, not locked in, because a lot of these staff are forever childcare workers, and it's what they want to do. But if they want to go somewhere else, we're going to let them go. So that's something that hasn't happened in this industry. And at the moment, our biggest thing is attraction of talent, and retention of talent, and keeping it and avoiding burnout. If they want to go somewhere else, let them go, and then they can come back when they're ready and they haven't lost anything.
Another innovation which I found interesting, particularly in your first business, and I'm sure you're still doing it now, but you would go in and review supplier and stakeholder relationships and contracts every 2 or so years, instead of letting them run out 5 or plus years before they were reviewed. What drove that from your perspective?
Yeah, look, price is one thing, but with the suppliers, we wanted to know it was always there, and that they could do it. And I love data. So if you can give me data, data over opinions is one of my mantras. And, and we track everything, for reasons, that aren't always, evident to everyone else. But, when you've got a supplier that's on your team and you run out of nappy wipes, or when COVID came through and you run out of toilet paper, and I'm loyal to him and he's loyal to me, and we just have a sit down every 2 years. It's never usually a price. Who's getting the toilet paper? It's me, because I'm loyal to them. And it's not that we're, that 2-year review. It's like, they know they've got me for 2 years. We'll have a chat at the end. There's a guy now that's put up my first sign at my first childcare centre in 21 years with the rebrand of this new group. He's still putting them up. There's the toy suppliers that people say, how do you still get that rate? And I said, because I've been loyal to them, and anything that toy supplier or that company can supply me, I buy it off them, because I know we've got a strong relationship. So whilst it sounds like we're making them sing for their money every 2 years, it's not. It's theirs to lose, and we, rather than us all getting on the phone and screaming, and if things aren't right, we condense it down to one chat. And and I'm loyal. It's very hard to change me from one supplier. If someone comes and pitches and I think it's a good idea, something that they're doing, I'll go and tell my existing supplier and ask them to do it instead. We're all in it together.
In 2012 and now in your 8th year of operations, although I think it was probably by that time maybe even a decade, because I think you started in '02 or thereabouts.
At '04, end of
Oh
'03
four.
we bought it, and yeah.
Yeah, so call it 8 years of operations. The business had some 400 female staff working across its centres. 2 years later, and by 2014, you'd now built, owned, or operated 37 centres. Clearly, there would have been a lot of challenges along the way. You've spoken about the financing environment, and I'm sure attracting and keeping staff would have been another one. Walk us through some of the key challenges that stood out during that time, and then how you managed to overcome them.
Challenges, there's always a learning in there, so we learnt something from it, and I think that rapid growth made us make a lot of mistakes or learn a lot of things really, really quickly. One of our other values is, okay, make a mistake, just make it quickly. Do you know what I mean? And as long as we learn something, it's not really a mistake, right? And as long as we do it quickly. But challenges, there's always challenges. Do you know what I mean? It's how big they become is up to us. Do you know what I mean? No one ever remembers what the problem is. They only remember how you react to it. So there's always that challenging parent or that staff member. But we would buy centres that came with a lot of human capital, and 9 times out of 10, only 2 or 3 of them survived because they were part of the problem. So when we were doing, you asked before about, we went in and started training our own staff. We had them all signed up to everything. Now that's pretty normal, government funded, but we were funding through training, all sorts of things. So that was a challenge, was getting staff and working out who was worth investing in and who wasn't. But you just learn from them, really, you throw the next challenge at us and learn something, and then hopefully it's not a challenge next time it comes around. So exposing ourselves to it.
I want to ask you about the deal with G8 Education, which I think was in 2014.
Yeah.
Was for 22 centres reportedly at a transaction cost of about 65 million. How did that deal come about, and what did you see as the next phase or chapter of your business career post-transaction?
Some of your numbers are, there might have been a couple more centres, and there might have been difference in those numbers, but I'm not going to clarify those for you. How did it come about? Childcare runs in 8-year cycles, and we were at the 8-year cycle, and I wasn't, we were humming, we were absolutely flying, and I was, everything was great. But I didn't know if I was ready to go around when the wheels, and they will start getting wobbly, if I had the energy to do it. And I was thinking about that, and the phone had been ringing and emails had been landing in inboxes, and I thought, I'm not ready. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I didn't think everything was quite perfect yet. But then I had a phone call from one guy, and it wasn't G8. It was on Boxing Day, and this guy didn't realise that it was Boxing Day, and I was like, right, he's ready. We're ready to do a deal now. And that only reason I was ready to entertain that convo is, we'd finished out the year. We had our annual Christmas party, which is our flagship event, and we pioneered, those really good events for our staff. They wanted to let their hand out. And childcare's hard. And I remember my wife saying to me, do you think there'll ever be, we're getting ready to go to the event, do you think there'll ever be a time that we don't need to go to these events? And I'd already been feeling I was pretty tired, and wrote another speech, which was all true, but it started to feel like I wasn't the man to keep. I was running out of ideas, to be honest, or I wasn't ready to face the next. I didn't know what I could do next if another problem arose, or I just, the playbook was getting empty. So when she said that to me, I was like, I think, and then that phone rang, shortly after on Boxing Day. I was like, the planets are aligning here. It's time to go. So, a term sheet arrived, and I was going to Bali, and we had a bit of a holiday, and I was like, things were still, this is good. And I didn't like these people, the people that rang on Boxing Day. I wasn't prepared to sell my business to them. That was never happening at the time they thought it was. But G8 had started doing some really good things, and I knew everyone. I knew everyone in the industry, from border to border. And so I rang G8 and I said, look, this is on the table. And they said, don't sign anything. We'll do the deal. And I said, well, if we're going to do the deal, we're going to need to do it quickly, because this is a really distressing time for my staff if it gets out that we're going to sell. So they promised me that everything would be, we started the convo with people. I said, I don't want any more money. I said, that's the deal. I'm happy with that deal. But everyone needs to get a job. And this is, and we laid down that. And I said, it needs to happen fast, because I can't have murmurings. And they did everything that they said they would do. And I announced it to the staff, and there was tears and all sorts, and now a lot of those staff are back, the management staff are back working for me, and they still recount that day. They said they just didn't see it coming, and neither did I. I didn't see it coming, but there was just a couple of things when I thought, I always said the for sale sign, I knew it was in the garage. I didn't know where it was in the garage. It wasn't on the front lawn, but something made me do that deal, and I don't regret it. I think it was a great reset that I needed. That company was heavily focused on us, and I had some great people in there that have all gone off to do some amazing things, and I think it was good. Everyone won out of that. It needed to happen. We still had a lot of that old style approach, it was good. I probably shouldn't have done nothing for 10. Well, not nothing, but I probably should have. I tried not to go back into childcare, but here we are.
I was going to ask you, post-transaction or post-deal, emotions of relief, sadness, what were you feeling, and what did you do to throw yourself into next?
Look, I've only just admitted this recently that I think, and I was very good at suppressing things, I did a deal, and I'm so efficient, my offices were rented out to someone else like the day after. And they took all my head office staff, and I remember going to work the next day, like on the Monday after a very long Friday lunch when it settled and a bigger weekend. And I remember seeing, I had kept a small section for myself and the finance person to clean everything up. And I remember seeing this person sitting in my desk, and I didn't realise at the time, but it did affect me a lot. Everything I'd sold my baby, but it did need to be sold. I had run out of puff. But I probably didn't need to put up those barriers that I put up, and I subjected myself to those barriers for 10 years. No, I'm not going back. And I was building for G8, so I was still in the industry. I've never really left, but I wasn't in that front line. But 5 years after that, I was developing, and then we got into it. I should have just been a bit more honest with myself that I like working. I like doing, being successful. There was a bit, you're quite successful, you only ever get, reported about the financial part of it. Unfortunately, success, rightly or wrongly, is measured on financial success all too often. But my success was we did it. We created a really good group. We broke down and created a whole load of new ways of doing, running, getting 400 people to all, champion our company. That was what I measured as success. We can talk more later about the group that we're back into now, which is filling that void of 10 years.
Absolutely, we'll touch on that. I just want to get a sense of, say, the last decade or so, or 11 years it is now since you sold the group. I think you kept 6 or 7 centres. No,
I didn't. I sold them all.
Sold them all as part of that deal. Yeah.
There was one person out of those. I think it was more than 400 at the end that survives, and he's been with me 19 years this year. Wow. I kept the one maintenance man, my dog sitter, and my children's uncle, they call him. And he survived, and he sat with me for that, when we were building other buildings and doing other things. But no, we did nothing. We went from 400 or 500 mouths and relying on me to just me and him, which was, it was interesting. But you do some things. You think you want to do this, and you think you want to do that, and you invest in other things. But realistically, I use this analogy with some people. I say I was knitting, and I was a very good knitter. And I just stopped knitting one day, and I tried crochet. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. it's okay to try and learn to crochet, but keep knitting. So I should have done that a lot earlier. I should have picked up and went back to childcare and did some other things if I wanted, other things that, go and buy a boat and walk out buying the dealership probably wasn't the smartest thing. But hey, they're all learning things. I've learned a lot. There's a few baseball teams that's still there. That's still a bit of fun. But I've always tried to have fun. But I think that drive of doing business and that what motivates me wasn't there for a while. But it's back now and I'm having a good time.
Just on some of those other things, so Marine, Perth, you acquired and ran it for a period at the Perth Heat Baseball Club, which you mentioned you're still an owner of. If I recall correctly, you also pursued some sort of commercial real estate projects and maybe some private sort of development projects? Or?
Yeah, we did a lot of, and still do a lot of private development stuff, buy some neighbourhood centres that are run down and, similar model to childcare, run down ones, and when we get around to it, we'll fully renovate them, turn them around, and new car parks and new shop fronts and stuff like that. So that's a bit of fun. That's I do enjoy the property development side of it, and haven't been able to do too much of it the last few years because it's just that landscape and just doesn't add up to do too much. So we're sitting. I built 18 centres for G8. Buildings, and then I ended up selling those out reluctantly at the end of 2021 on a record-setting yield, but did that. Haven't been able to replace that income, so that was interesting. I don't think you can borrow the money for what they paid me, so it was a good deal, but it was a bit of a hard one. Marine, the marine industry wasn't ready for me. Riviera gave me that dealership actually, and I said, okay, I'll take it, but I need to get, all your boats have Volvo engines. I want a Volvo. You've got some pull. I want a Volvo dealership. And they said, I said, well, get me the Volvo. So they did. They got me a Volvo dealership, and we set that up, and then. That was a separate business again, and then I was like, I'm paying all these guys, these cleaning people and these maintenance people, I'll buy that business. So I bought that, and we had all three of them, and the model was working. It was really good. And then I couldn't get stock. Riviera just weren't producing the stock. So I said to the owner, who had not long bought Riv from Receivers, I said, I want to buy one of every model that you got. I'm buying one, and he wouldn't do it. And probably pretty smart, because he said, no, he goes, I can't. He goes, the other dealers need it. I said, yeah, but when they need it, if I haven't sold it, I'll sell it to them. And he knew that I was going to sell it to them, 50 grand for my production slot. So he was smart enough to say no to me, and I said, well, this ain't going to work. I said, because I need stock. I can't sell air. That these things, it's I've got to keep my salesmen motivated. They need to be making money, and if they're not making money when they can't sell anything, I said, you're going to need to buy me back. Because, but I gave it to you. I said, and I gave you the dealership as well. I said, yeah, but I put a lot into it. So we come to a deal, and made some quick money. Got out alive, but I also realised that some industries aren't ready to be tampered with and changed. And that was one of them that we learned pretty quickly, that they're pretty happy just chugging along on their own little way and weren't ready for us. So we got out of there pretty quick. It was 18 months.
I want to ask you about Vassallo Corporation. Would you call that sort of a private investment vehicle, a family office, and what's its sort of function?
Yeah, look, it's my own company. It used to trade, it did a lot of things. Now it is just a private office. We're not doing too much outside of childcare. We're pretty much childcare and property these days. It manages all of our charities that we give away a lot of money. I'm trying to it's on the list to streamline that process. We get to the end of every ball season of charity, and I'm thinking, we've got to get better at this. Yes. I've never been good at saying no because I don't like hearing no. But it's the private office, and we're transforming that a bit. We've got to do that better. So Yeah, being back at working and stuff, we're probably getting through it. It was just its early item, but now it's on the list. So we'll get to that because there's things we want to do. Got a lot of unfinished business everywhere, but we're pretty focused on it now.
Your philanthropic endeavours, clearly you're a big advocate for giving and donating your time and resources to charity. What drives your thinking there?
It's those that can should. That's always been my belief. We've obviously, primarily child focused, or mental health. We do a lot with youth mental health and stuff like that. It's a big thing. We are. We're very focused on Australia though as well. I think a lot of ours, and not saying it should be ignored, but we've got some big problems in our own backyard. So I do tell every charity that how does Australia benefit and how does Australia's children and people benefit from anything that we give, because we can respond where we need to when things happen outside of Australia, but our primary goal and long term, when we've given away and supported all the majors as well as the minors for a long time. So my girls know that when I'm gone that they have to continue that, and that's a condition of things. So if you can, you should. And I think it's part of drive. It's that feel good that there is a benefit. Everyone wins from being philanthropic.
21 years in business this year. You've been active. What are the keys to success in your terms?
Listening, and just no one's got the mortgage on good ideas. Challenge the status quo, and think big. You don't need to keep it small. You can think big, and that doesn't need to be, big in terms of scale and size. It can just be have big dreams. Have a big thought process. Don't be narrow-minded. We keep things right, and just because we did it today doesn't mean we need to do it tomorrow. Challenge everything, because there's always a better way to do everything.
What drives you each day, or what inspires you to get up and have a crack each day?
I like working. I like people coming along the ride with us as well. A lot of the amount of people that want to do things in industries that I'm in. No one's ever worked for me. Everyone's worked with me, and just for giving that. We're back in childcare again, and we're doing these things. One thing I'd like to do is a management buyout. So trying to help other people do good things, because there's some pretty impressive people out there. I was lucky enough that it was a different time then. I don't think it's as easy to do what I did. If someone wanted to leave school at 14 and 9 months and do what I've done, I just don't think that's an option anymore. I'd like to think it is, but I'm not sure it is. So people, I help people, I mentor people, I do as much as I can. So helping and achieving and challenging the quo, that's what drives me. Why? Asking that question, why? I'm Gen Y. I ask, but why do we do it like that? So, and then understanding it is that's what drives me.
Born and raised in Perth and still obviously reside here in Western Australia. You've travelled a lot throughout Australia, no doubt, and throughout the world. How have you seen the evolution of Western Australia, be it from a business landscape or be it infrastructure or just the state's development more generally?
It's an interesting place. We've got there's a lot of wealth here, from all levels. A lot of people that live in Kwinana are very wealthy. We've got that mining industry, we've got the FIFO. It's got a hell of a lot of challenges though. The evolution of WA needs to be about people. We need human capital, not any more investment, because that's not where we're lacking. It's that human capital. We just don't have people here to support the restaurants, to support industry, to do anything. I was in Queensland last week, and the restaurants are open and there's people in them. Here, there's barely staff to serve the people, and the people just aren't there because they're working and they're in the mines, or we've got a real people shortage problem. When I heard Peter Costello say all those years ago when I was in, probably still living in Kwinana. Have one for mum, one for dad, and one for the country. I never understood it, but I do understand now that we're running out of people.
What does the next chapter look like for you? You're back involved in the childcare industry now. Give us a sense of what you've been up to and where you want to head with it.
Look, we've taken, I have a group of centres again that I'm now steering the ship of, which I'm really enjoying. I'm not going to burn out on this group. I'm not going to run out of things to do because it's more of a passion project and a bit of fun, and we're not worried about paying mortgages anymore. The financial landscape is very different to what it was, and we're investing heavily on all the things. It's a bit easier when you got money to do it properly, and everyone's going to benefit from that, from our group, and our staff are benefiting from it. I'm recently remarried. We're expecting a child in a few months. So, my wife said to me, if you put in your paternity leave application, which I was just like, what do you mean I'm going to work through? But you know what? I won't work through. So we're getting a work-life balance is happening now. I've always done things backwards, so having another go at doing it the right way this time. So yeah, I want to keep it forever, and it gives me something, which is not money. I don't need that. It gives me joy going to work and putting in new systems and programs and watching it work, and everyone else, learning from it as well, and we're all learning together. So that's what drives me.
Rory Vassallo, it's been an absolute pleasure having the opportunity to share your career. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much.